Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. Like most forgettable weekends, it began. I had recently moved into Pinebrook, a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of a metropolis. Although it wasn't the most pleasant place I had ever lived, it was affordable, peaceful, and close enough to my new job for me to walk if my old car broke down at some point. Smack dab in the center of a neighborhood that appeared to have been constructed in the late 1980s. The apartment complex itself was at an unexpected location. Lines of this out-of-place brick complex was surrounded by well-kept homes with clipped lawns, porch swings, and faded basketball hoops, as if it had been accidentally dropped from the sky. Since I hadn't done much exploring yet, I thought that my best friend Laurel's weekend visit would be the ideal excuse. She said, "Want to check out some thrift stores?" She kicked off her sneakers and collapsed like she lived on my shabby couch. "I'm in the mood to dig through old junk and pretend it's treasure." "God, yes," I replied with a grin. We spent the whole of that Saturday afternoon hopping between consignment stores, thrift stores, and a small antique mall that smelled like lemon polish and dust. I need new dishes, and Goodwill never disappoints. Laurel discovered an odd ceramic. I paid $5 for a set of mismatched dishes, and she insisted she had to have a clown. We were both still on the high from possible treasure hunting by the time we completed our third iced coffee of the day. As we pulled into the apartment parking lot, Laurel quipped, "I promise we're going to find a haunted mirror one day. For example, one that reverses whispers Latin." I gave an eye roll. "Do you want to?" With a smile, she gestured through the windshield. "What's that?" "Hello." There was a temporary yard sign buried in the ground, just ahead at the intersection where my street curved onto the main road. From the vehicle, it appeared to be one of those political ones that people neglected to remove following the election. But when we got closer, we noticed that a sheet of white paper with a black Sharpie and all caps was taped over it. 84 Butler Avenue is for sale. It had been taped in several places with what appeared to be duct tape by someone who was either in a hurry or simply didn't care. The sign appeared dejected and was on the verge of collapsing. It fluttered slightly in the wind. "It has a strange vibe," I said. "Hey, they might have some furnishings." Laurel rubbed her hands together dramatically and declared, "We're in junk hunting mode. Come on." As soon as we left the flat, the rain began. It was only the languid, spitting rain that darkens the sky, not very heavy, sidewalk and gives off the scent of damp leaves. We decided to go the short distance to 84 Butler and take a look, so we grabbed hoodies in place of umbrellas. It was calm in the neighborhood, even though it was beginning to drizzle. An older man across the street was mowing his lawn as a few cars went by. It was late November, but Laurel pointed out a house that still had Halloween decorations up. "Bold decision," she remarked. "There is a feel to skeleton Sontar." We chuckled, but the atmosphere changed as we went onto Butler Avenue. Even though it was rapidly growing dark, the older, slightly more distant residences here had no lights on. The rain began to fall a little more forcefully. I also recall thinking that I ought to have packed an umbrella. In any case, as soon as we arrived at 84 Butler, something didn't feel quite right. Laurel squinted at the numbers painted on the curb and said, "This the place?" "Yeah," I said, making sure by checking the mailbox. "This is it." Our first warning sign was that the house had no garage, no tables outside, no clothes racks, nothing that even remotely looked like a yard sale, and only a silver sedan with a faded for sale sign taped to the inside of the windshield in the driveway. Not a yard sale, a car sale, so Laurel suggested that they must have packed up. When I stepped closer, I noticed a piece of paper taped to the front door, resembling a printer sheet with all caps scrawled across it. "Sale is inside. Come on in." Perhaps the rain scared them away. I paused. "That's strange, isn't it?" Laurel scowled. "Like, really strange, really strange. Who brings strangers in for a sale?" There was another paper behind that sign. I recognized the terms notification and desalojo, but I couldn't read much of it because it was in Spanish. It was wrinkled, barely taped on, and billowing in the breeze, looking like an official document yellowed with a seal or stamp on the top corner. "Is that an eviction notice?" I inquired. I went out onto the porch to get a better look through the front window, which was streaked with dust and water, but I could see what appeared to be a completely empty living room. No couch, no TV, no boxes, just a blank carpet and a leaning stack of newspapers near the corner. "Looks like it," Laurel said, her voice now lower. I backed off the porch and muttered, "This doesn't feel right," because the home was empty and hardly visible in the backdrop. There wasn't even a dish towel on the oven. Laurel gave a brief nod. I heard no footsteps, no voices, and no creaking, but as we turned to go, the door creaked open, and we froze. It didn't swing wide, only a few inches, as if someone within had pushed it open and then stopped. Flooring, only the faint hiss of distant traffic and the soft tap of rain on the roof. "Lel," I muttered, "let's leave now." She didn't need convincing. We speed walked halfway back to the apartment before she finally said, "Did you hear anything? Like, is there anyone inside?" I gave a head shake. We didn't discuss it much after that. Just made popcorn, turned on a stupid horror film, and tried to laugh it off. But even though Laurel left the following morning, the strange feeling stayed with me. Nothing. I didn't even see anyone. Yet the door opened. I know. 84 Butler was the same as I drove by it the following day and the day after, with no lights, no movement, and no indication that someone lived there. However, the sale inside sign was still on the door, and on the third day, I saw something more. Someone was still urging people to go inside. And that night I contacted the non-emergency police number. Down the block, there was another sign, smaller and more recent, taped to a street light. "Final day. Everything must go. 84 Butler Avenue." The dispatcher was courteous, but dismissive, so I wasn't sure what to say at first. "Hello, yes. There's a suspicious house with phony yard sale signs and a perhaps eviction notice. We'll send someone to investigate." I don't know if they ever did, but I was reading in my living room that night when I heard 3 faint knocks. They weren't at my door. They were at the kitchen's glass sliding door that opened to the back patio, and I froze, backed up to a small patch of woods. There were no sidewalks, and there was no reason for anyone to be back there. It took me almost 20 minutes to find the courage to check, and when I did, there was nobody there, but there was a piece of printer paper taped to the outside of the glass, thin and smeared with rain. I never found out who was posting those signs. I never returned to that street. And I didn't even want to drive close to the house at 84 Butler AV. I moved out 2 weeks later, and I'm not sure if the city took any action or if the property was ever condemned. However, there are moments when I wonder if someone was squatting there, enticing people in, perhaps for theft or something worse, or if the house wasn't abandoned at all, whether it was simply waiting for someone to come inside without asking questions. I had witnessed yard sales 100 times as a child, with families setting out old DVDs, crock pots, and bags of clothing on folding tables, while neighbors strolled in sipping coffee. It seemed innocuous, informal, and even somewhat social, but I never imagined mine would become one of the most terrifying events of my life. However, nothing about that summer was typical. I was 25 years old, just out of a breakup that left me feeling angry, tired, and ready to start over. I had spent 3 years living in the same little house in Elmdale, a quiet working-class town outside of St. Louis, where everyone knew the neighbors. The yard sale was supposed to be the first step, so I spent the entire week cleaning out closets, dragging old furniture into the garage, and labeling boxes. I had not grown up there, though, and I never really clicked with the community. After everything with my ex ended, I decided to move to Kansas City in hopes of finding a new job and, hopefully, a quieter head. By 7:30 a.m., I had tables set up across the driveway and in part of the yard, had even made coffee and placed bottled water for the early birds. I had scheduled it for a Saturday morning in early August, one of those humid Midwest days when the heat seems like a damp towel on your skin. Error number 1. I thought I'd be fine on my own when my best friend Carly was supposed to come help, but her child had a fever that morning. By 8 o'clock, people began to arrive, mostly elderly people, a few families with children tugging at plastic toys, and a couple of women looking through my box of novels. I talked, haggled, and made she arrived at 9:45, dressed in a loose floral top and black leggings, her hair tied up in a messy bun, and she walked purposefully straight toward the table where I had my designer items laid out. I had changed, and even received a few compliments on my setup, which felt nice, peaceful even. Among them were scarves, a jewelry box, a couple of purses, and one very special pair of sandals, strappy leather wedges with gold buckles that my ex-boyfriend, Travis, had brought back from a business trip in Vegas. They were brand new, never worn, and still in the box with the tags on them. The retail price was probably between $220 and $300 when someone showed me pictures of him with a lady at a casino. I discovered that the business trip had featured more drinking and infidelity than genuine work. I never wore the sandals and couldn't even look at them without feeling sick to my stomach. So I sold them for $5. The woman picked up the box and opened it cautiously, as if she were waiting for a trap to spring, and her eyes brightened when she saw the shoes. Yes, it was petty, but I wanted someone to get a deal, someone who deserved a deal, and for those shoes to be gone forever. $5, she said. Yep, I replied. Brand, never worn, she answered hesitantly. I give you to that way. I blinked. I apologize, but price is adamant. Come on, she said. You won't get 5. She warned, her voice growing piercing. They're not even that pleasant. I tried to remain composed as I answered. They retail for over $200. A deal is being offered to you. She gave me a narrowed look. So why are you asking $5 for it? Is there a problem with them? I forced a smile and responded, nope. Simply put, they are no longer necessary. Scoffing, she flipped the box over and examined the soles as if she were searching for harm. I folded my arms, attempting to hide my irritation. Others were perusing, observing the exchange from the corners of their eyes. Her words were, I give you $250. It's 5, I said, a little more firmly. She looked at me for a moment before saying, sorry. Then she lost her temper. With such force that the sandals flew out, she slammed the box shut and tossed it back onto the table. She yelled, you think you're better than me? The heads turned. You think I don't know shoes? People stopped. Please, ma'am, I started. You skinny little underscore, don't you man me? She shouted harshly and loudly, her accent getting thicker. You don't think I can purchase these? You believe I am in need of your charity? I was taken aback and utterly confused. I just tried to maintain my composure. I said, I think we're done here. Her eyes were burning, and she spewed out the words like poison as she cursed at me in a language I didn't understand. Then she stomped off down the street after turning. I stood there, trembling a little, attempting to collect my poise. What the hell? Muttered a number of women near the jewelry stand. And she was crazy. I was assisted in picking up the sandals. At that point, I wanted to leave, but I had only earned approximately $60. I had a lot more to sell. I inhaled deeply and continued. That was the second error. I saw her again around 15 minutes later. She was pulling a man along with her as she hurried up the walkway. He was huge, perhaps 6 feet 4 inches, with broad shoulders, a thick neck, and camouflage shorts and a soiled grey t-shirt. Before he spotted me, his face was expressionless. Then it twisted into a chilly substance. They approached the table and me directly before coming to a halt. He shouted, You the one trying to rip off my wife? Shocked, I exclaimed, I what? He took a step toward her. You're trying to sell my wife some broken ass shoes for $5. After treating her with such contempt, with a slight backward step, I said, I didn't disrespect anyone. She made an attempt to give me $2. She stated you made her feel humiliated, and I replied, no, that's it. You made her look bad in public. I raised my voice and said, she screamed at me. He slammed his ceramic mug rattles on the table, palm down. You consider yourself humorous. By this time, other customers were retreating. I watched a mother gather her two children and virtually dash to her vehicle. His wife was now attempting to take the sandal box from my hands by grabbing it off the table once more. You don't want no trouble. Give her the dang shoes, the man snarled. I'm 5 feet 3 inches and maybe 120 pounds, and my heart was beating so loudly that I could hardly hear myself think. I could have been destroyed by this guy, and all of a sudden, I realized that nobody else had taken over. However, someone did. Hey, a voice called out. A pair of unfamiliar women approached from the other side of the street. One had her phone out already, recording with the camera. The other was prepared to dial hers. One of them said to back off. The man froze, his eyes darting to the camera, and said, "We're calling the cops," he yelled. "You serious right now?" "Dead serious," said the woman. Step, he gave me a final sneer before grabbing his wife by the wrist and yanking her away. Over her shoulder, she yelled something at me, but I was unable to hear her. After crossing the street, they climbed into an old black Suburban and drove off. Immediately after that, I packed up everything, didn't care about the rest of the stuff, and didn't wait for the midday crowd. The two women who had assisted me remained until I had completed packing the garage. We exchanged a weak laugh about horrific stories from garage sales, and I thanked them 100 times. However, I felt ill on the inside. I couldn't stop thinking about what could have occurred if they hadn't intervened later that evening. If the man had taken out a phone, if no one had concluded that hurting someone for $5 was worth it. Since then, I haven't held another yard sale, and I never will, because I now understand how quickly things can get out of control, regardless of how many people tell me it's just some weirdos or that you're just unfortunate. How erratic people may become when they are questioned or insulted. Later that week, I sold the sandals online. I received $90 for them. However, that $5 was nearly the most costly error I have ever made. It wasn't until I ran out of room in my small 2-bedroom rental on the west side of Elmsworth that I decided to hold a yard sale. It seemed like the house was closing in on me because of the college furniture I had left behind, the boxes from my last move that I had never unpacked, and other items I hadn't touched in months or even years. I was busy, but not really a hoarder. There wasn't much time for decluttering when working 2 jobs. At last, I had scheduled a Saturday for today. I assumed that people would be more inclined to browse outside as the weather had just begun to warm up. I put up notices on the grocery store's community board, on the yard sale group on Facebook, and on the one next door. The answer exceeded my expectations, even though I didn't have high expectations. I remained up late the night before, pricing everything, including clothes, mismatched crockery, ancient Bluetooth speakers, novels, to lamps, a coffee table I never used, a Sharpie and masking tape, and, after much deliberation, my PS4. It had been nearly 8 months since I had touched that console, which I loved. Life, work, and bills had buried my leisure time beneath a mountain of tension. Nevertheless, I put it up for sale, charging $250 for 2 controllers and 6 good games. For 2 controllers and 6 good games. The price was designed to deter buyers unless they were truly committed. I wouldn't argue if someone paid for it. By 6:30 a.m., everything was arranged in my driveway on folding tables. Although I lived close to a park on a quieter side street, traffic increased early on the weekends. People began to arrive. The early risers treat treasure hunting like a sport. Most of them were elderly, kind, and courteous, and they frequently joked. Oh my, recall stuff. They grabbed a blanket, a few novels, and a couple mugs. Not one iota of attention was paid to the PS4 around 9 a.m. She arrived by herself, a person in their late 30s or early 40s, with ash blonde hair and pale skin, was seen coming up from the street while wearing a large, floppy sun hat. She donned enormous sunglasses that completely concealed her eyes. Something about her posture seemed rigid and natural. She wasn't relaxed like most choppers. She moved with purpose. "Morning," I offered casually. She didn't answer. She zoomed in on the gaming stuff immediately, like she'd read my article online, and came expressly for it. There was a tiny stack of PS4 and Xbox games placed up alongside the console, as if she knew what she was doing. She took them up one by one and flipped them over. "These are $10 each?" she asked, voice flat. "Yep," I answered. "All in good condition." She made a sound between a scarf and a laugh. "These are ancient, don't you know that?" I gave a shrug. "It's a yard sale," she spat, as if she were personally insulted. "They still sell for more at GameStop." "I'm not giving them away," I calmly but firmly stated. My stomach began to turn slightly. Compared to the typical haggling, her tone was more angry. As if she wanted to crack the cases, she set the games down firmly. "You're charging too much," she murmured. "That's what this is, exploiting people." I didn't answer. I was becoming uncomfortable. Muttering to herself, she turned suddenly. Then she remarked, loud enough for me to hear, "That PS4 is going to sit there until it's rotting. No one's going to buy your overpriced junk." She then left. I remained silent. All I wanted was for her to leave. I hoped that was the last time I would see her because of the strange, oily coating her attitude had put on the morning. About 20 minutes later, however, I saw her once more as she crossed the street on the sidewalk and then circled the block. Over the next hour, she came by my house 3 times, just walked without making eye contact. I made an effort to shake it off. Perhaps she lived close by. Perhaps she was simply taking a stroll. Sometimes people are strange. The remainder of the day went as usual. I sold the lamps, the coffee table, and several books. A teenager inquired about the PlayStation 4, promised to return later with money, but he never did. By 3:00 p.m. I got to work packing. I was exhausted that evening. With the TV playing softly in the background, I prepared boxed mac and cheese, and then collapsed on the couch while browsing through my phone. Context: I shut everything off at 11:30 and went to bed. I heard the sound at that moment. There was a gentle metallic clink, however, clink, clink, like a faint metal tapping sound. In the hallway, I froze. I slipped to the front window and peeked out, but the light in my living room was still out. Nothing, yet there was an uneasy feeling. I made my way along the side of the house to the kitchen. Just past the laundry nook was the seldom used side entrance. I left the porch light off, peeked through the small square window's curtain. There she was, the earlier woman, Napsimu and Yuganaz, identical sunglasses. She was working at the lock, even at night, while kneeling by the door and holding something. My heart seemed to halt for a moment. Initially, I wanted to call the police, but I became anxious. What would happen if she entered before they did? But what if she was armed? However, she appeared absurd, resembling a suburban mother acting as a spy. Nevertheless, there was an attempt to enter my home. I groped for the old aluminum baseball bat I kept behind the kitchen door, my hands shaking. I never moved it, and my ex had left it there. With my heart racing, I slipped back to the side window. She was trying, but she hadn't been able to open the door yet. I pulled the curtain back and rapped on the window pane. "Hello." She jerked to her feet, dropped a metal object, a pin, a pick, or something, and looked at me through the glass. "Via the glass," I yelled. "If you don't leave right now, I promise God that I'll go out there and break your skull open." Her face remained motionless. No guilt, no fear. She merely gazed at me. Then, without warning, she turned and left, vanishing into the darkness. I didn't get any sleep. I checked all the locks in the house again the following morning. I choose not to report it. I was unable to explain why. Perhaps I didn't want to deal with the police, or perhaps I simply assumed it would worsen the situation. The day continued. I attempted to ignore it, while working a half shift at the diner. I put a chair behind the doorknob and slept with the bat next to me that night. No noise, no guests. It wasn't over, though. One of my recycle bins had been moved when I got home from work the third night following the yard sale. It had been positioned as if someone had stood on it, right in front of the side entrance, just beneath the lock, the door framer scuff marks. The following day, I fitted a camera that was adequate yet inexpensive from Amazon. I directed it straight at the side entrance, and once more at 12:17 a.m. that night, the video demonstrated motion. The same spectacles, same hat, same woman. She didn't try the door this time. For about 6 minutes, she simply stood there. She had her hands by her sides. She remained still. Then she turned to leave. At last, I dialed the cops. The officer was courteous, but obviously doubtful. "Do you know her?" he inquired. She came to my yard sale and grabbed the number, angry over the costs. "That's all." He arched an eyebrow. "And you believe that video games are the reason she's pursuing you?" It was true, even if I felt foolish admitting it. They filed a report, but it was never used. I showed them the video. She would come every few nights for the next 2 weeks, even though they said they would patrol the neighborhood more often, always from midnight to 1 in the morning, constantly wearing the same attire. They observe without ever talking or attempting to re-enter. Then she wasn't alone one night. At 12:39 a.m., the camera detected movement. She appeared first, followed by a taller figure in a dark hoodie. As she approached the side entrance, he stood at the frame's edge. At that moment, she took a spray bottle out of her bag. I discovered something scribbled across the door in weak red letters the following morning. "Those who steal burn." The final straw was that afternoon, I went out of town to stay with my cousin on the other side of the river. 3 days later, when I got back, everything was silent. The woman did not return. The man didn't either. However, I'm still unsure of her identity, her true desires, and the extent of her potential. This is all I know. I never held another yard sale, and I kept the PS4. Once more, I never imagined that a lazy Saturday morning would bring me to something I couldn't even begin to explain, let alone get out of. It was a dreary, overcast morning in late January, when everything seemed to be moving slowly and quietly. In North Carolina, I had recently relocated to a little hamlet outside of Asheville, Stillwater, with a population of only 5,000. The majority of my days were spent painting, fixing drywall, and attempting to make the fixer-upper my aunt had left behind after she moved to Florida appear less like a forgotten time capsule. While driving home from the hardware store, I noticed a handwritten yard sale today sign, but I wasn't specifically looking for anything. The arrows led toward an older community along a meandering lane, mostly simple ranch houses with drooping porches from years of use. Why not? I reasoned. Maybe I'd find something intriguing for the house, and I needed a break. A weary-looking woman in her late 50s, wearing a heavy green cardigan, was in charge of the sale. She was standing next to a folding table that was littered in dusty VHS cassettes, broken cups, and the typical garage sale fare. I nodded courteously to her and began perusing. I saw it at that moment. The mirror. It leaned clumsily against a tree, as if it had been purposefully placed aside. The frame was made of dark oak and was engraved with elaborate floral and spiral patterns. It was almost 5 feet tall and weighty looking, with that antique glass that distorts everything inside like an old photograph. The woman saw me watching and exclaimed, "You like it?" The thing never really appealed to me. When my sister died, she left it behind. Her tone had a certain quality. Level, contemptuous, detachment, not sadness. I stepped closer and said, "It's beautiful, you can just take that if you buy anything else." She continued, "To be honest, I would prefer not to pack it up again." Mostly out of guilt, I spent $10 on a reading lamp and a ceramic bowl. She was helpful. I put the mirror into my Jeep's rear. She mumbled, almost as an afterthought, "Be careful with it." When I got home, I placed it in the dining room and carefully leaned it against the wall to make a long-term decision. I had no intention of hanging it just yet. I wanted to clean it up first, but I'd need strong anchors. I brought out some glass cleaner and paper towels, singing to myself as I worked. The dining room lights flickered once, then again. I glanced up, vaguely annoyed. The house wiring had been unreliable since I moved in. Nothing new. What was new, though, was the way my cats reacted. Knox and Luna, my rescue cats, had always been curious yet peaceful. Now they were hunkered along the edge of the corridor, ears flat, staring at the mirror, not playing, not running, just watching. Knox, I whispered lightly. It's only a mirror, bud. He remained still. That night, I had the first nightmare. In the dream, I was standing in front of the mirror. Only, it wasn't in my house anymore. It was in a vast, unfamiliar room filled with antique furniture, wrapped in white sheets. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. My second too late, reflection blinked. My heart was racing when I woke up, and I couldn't recall anything that had happened after the blink, just that something had changed, and it didn't seem right. I began to notice little things over the course of the following week, where there should be no shadows. In the reflection behind me was the outline of a human form. However, the room was deserted when I turned. The mirror's reflection moved a little after I brushed my teeth across the hall, after I had been watching it intently. A slight but genuine delay. When I told my buddy Kelsey over the phone, she suggested that perhaps you're simply stressed. Many changes in a new location. Strange things happen in our minds. I said, I know what I saw. I'm not alone. The cats no longer even enter the dining room. She hesitated. Do you want me to spend a night or two with you? The number. Probably nothing. I said a falsehood. However, when I returned home one evening to discover the mirror had been changed, I was unable to ignore it any longer. It was still upright. It remained upright. But now, it was a few inches away from the wall. It just moved. There were no paw tracks, scratches, or indications of a struggle. I chose to cover it with a blanket, out of mind and out of sight. However, the blanket was gone by dawn. Not only on the ground, gone. Later that day, I discovered it inside the dryer in the laundry room. It had been 2 days since I did my laundry. I had the dream again that night. My reflection didn't move at all this time. I gestured with my hands. Nothing. It gave me a spontaneous smile when I leaned in close. I screamed as I woke up. I didn't bring up the mirror when my dad came over the next weekend, but he picked it up on his own. Where'd you get that thing? He said, staring at it with a grimace. Yard sale, I said. Why? He took a step back. I'm not sure. Simply made me feel strange. We were watching a movie that night when he looked out into the hallway and mumbled, I swear I saw someone pass by that fucking mirror just now. I pushed it into the closet in the corridor, supported it, and closed the door. That was beneficial for a while, but then it wasn't. I would hear faint knocking noises late at night. Then there was the sound of something dragging glass, scratching like nails. I discovered the closet in the hallway was open. The door had been unlatched, but the mirror remained. It had been days since I had touched it. A week ago was the worst. A knock came from behind me as I was in the kitchen cooking, the stovetop hissing as onions sizzled in a skillet. It was a sharp, purposeful knock, not a casual touch. I live on the second floor, so I spun around expecting to see someone at the kitchen window. There is nothing but empty air under that window, no balcony, no fire escape. With a spatula in hand, I stood motionless, gazing at the glass. I sensed something even though there was nothing, no face, no movement. I can feel this icy, hollow awareness shivering up my back. I created an online listing that evening, free with pickup for a vintage antique mirror. I didn't explain. It didn't sell, but I just wanted it gone. And nobody turned up, but a few people inquired about it. Then the nightmares worsened. I now return to that room every night, complete with the white sheets, the mirror in the middle, and the calm air. The reflection no longer merely smiles. It speaks. I don't understand what it murmurs. Words that reverberate even after I wake up, clawing and rasping. And I always feel like someone was right in the room with me when I wake up, sweating and gasping. I'm not sure if I'm the one who's haunted or the mirror. I attempted to destroy it yesterday. I intended to smash it with a hammer, so I dragged it out to the yard. I hesitated, though, when I stood over it. The sky behind me did not match the reflection. It was darker, as if the glass were a doorway into a different world, and I swear it moved for a second. A figure leaned closer in the mirror. I ran inside after dropping the hammer. I'm at a loss on what to do. A part of me fears that whatever it is will follow me if I throw it. I've already waited too long, according to another section. Something that wasn't written with lipstick or a marker was carved into the interior of my bathroom mirror this morning. 3 words, carved. Give me a break. I don't think this is just an object anymore. I think something's attached. Something ancient, angry. Something that saw me the moment I laid eyes on it at that yard sale. And I don't know how to make it stop. It started with a simple sign. White cardboard, red paint, letters a touch uneven, but legible enough. Yard sale on Saturday at 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. An arrow pointed east, where the sun was already making everything look gold and dust fleck. In late October, it was a Saturday morning. I had just dropped off at our recycling in Echo Valley with my husband, Tom, a little area of ancient neighborhoods on the outskirts of the slopes of Santalella. The sort of place where each home was unique, some still neat with fresh paint and rock gardens, others drooping into the dirt, worn out and left behind. We were both in our mid-30s, married almost a decade, no kids, just the shared pastime of digging through other people's discarded lives. You can call them garage cleanouts, yard sales, estate sales, etc. We had a weekend routine. You'd be astonished how many memories you can acquire for around $5. Sipping cold brew from a repurposed mason jar, Tom was driving. He tapped the driving wheel in the direction of the sign and said, "Want to follow it?" I adjusted the canvas and responded, "Yeah, why not?" Did the canvas and responded, "Yeah, why not?" I have a tote bag on my lap. It's not yet late. We entered the older section of town after turning onto a road that curled up through arid hills, mostly retirees and recluses. Silver Pines is a little hamlet that is barely surviving. Tinsel from last Christmas was still dangling from the gutters of half the houses. Others had boarded up windows and no trespassing signs. A rotting V in the driveway, 3 broken down automobiles in a yard, and a brightly painted, bizarrely happy house with a bright yellow entrance were all things we passed. The following sign indicated that location: yard sale, Silver Pines Road, 27. Tom turned and slowed. It was a simple dwelling, a crooked white mailbox hanging out like a drunk, worn concrete steps, faded pale blue exterior, and a single story. On the sparse front yard, among rustling oaks that had not yet turned, were a few folding tables. There was a metallic and leafy fragrance to the air, perhaps old tools. The only sounds were the flutter of a tablecloth and the stream of the breeze. There was no music or conversation. We left even though there was something strange about it. At sales, I always move rapidly, avoiding the crowd, surveying the area quickly, and going to the areas that most people overlook. Tom stays behind with tools and literature. I use old stationery, linens, and occasionally kitchenware. However, the side yard with several tables arranged beneath a bent poplar tree caught my attention today. I caught sight of them there. 4 large tables, all decked out for Christmas, not the corny variety that you get at big box retailers. These were delicate and old. Some were hand-painted, while others were frosted or sparkled. Many of them are obviously older than us. The first table had a carved knoll sign with candle holders incorporated into the text, wooden plaques with gold foil script, felt banners with embroidered corollas, and wall hangings. There were hundreds of glass, tin, and ceramic tree decorations on the second table. One drew my attention. It was a small glass bell with bent wings that resembled an angel, like hands in prayer, moving forth. I hesitated as I grabbed for it. There were flat surface decorations, centerpieces, small Christmas town buildings, tinsel trees, reindeer with faded red ribbons, and a towering, perhaps 10-inch, chrome-like, frosted silver Sontar figurine in the middle of the third table. It was so realistic, so precise, that he was holding a lamp in one hand and a sack in the other. It trembled, not pulsing, not swaying in the breeze. It was trembling as if it were alive, steadily, as though being swayed by invisible hands, but not violently. I went cold. The porcelain deer, pine cone wreaths, snow globes, and everything else on the table were motionless as stone. The leaves surrounding us have even quieted down. There was silence, complete silence. I took a look around. Nobody. There is nobody in the side yard. No vendor, no customers. Tom was no longer even audible to me. I leaned down and watched intently, squinting. The Sontar wasn't connected. It wasn't on a spring or a moving platform. Furthermore, nothing at all was close enough to trigger the movement. I stepped back and blinked. I heard her at that moment. "Oh, isn't he stunning?" a voice behind me said. I pivoted. An elderly woman with grey hair pushed back, wearing black pants, a pale cardigan, and possibly late sevens, stood there. She had a gentle, weathered face that made you want to trust her right away. She looked down at the Sontar, with a smile on her face. Figurine. "It's been years since I saw him dance like that," she whispered, her eyes sparkling. "Dance?" I inquired, attempting to speak in an even voice. "Is it motorized?" "Huh." She laughed. "I guess the number is just full of spirit." Then, as though she had only noticed my presence, she turned to face me. My husband's favorite was him. He would place him on the mantle each year. Claimed that Sontar appeared to be attempting to lead him home. She spoke so naturally and with such affection. I did not want to spoil the occasion. I smiled softly and nodded. "He's stunning." She extended her hand and touched one of the table's decorations. Her nails were beautifully clipped, and her fingers were slender and aged. We spent our entire lives collecting these, and we had a ton of them. Since I've never had children, I suppose they're all orphans now, but I'm confident someone will look after them well, I replied softly. She grinned once more. I hope so. The silver Sontar finally stopped moving as a breeze shifted, lifting the edges of the tablecloths. I briefly glanced in the direction of the street, the tree. She was gone when I turned around. I looked around the yard, thinking she might have gone inside or moved to another table. Nothing. It wasn't until then that I realized it was quiet once more. I walked around the front lawn. Near the front steps, Tom was leafing through a milk crate of records. "Hey," I said. He looked up and asked, "Did you see an older lady walk past?" "No, it's just the guy inside and us." I turned to face the house. The door stood open. Behind a folding table, a younger woman, perhaps in her late 20s, was collecting money. I approached. "Hello," brief inquiry. "Earlier, was there an older woman present?" Cardigan, grey hair, somewhat short. The girl appeared perplexed. "Since we opened, I have only seen the two of you." I scowled. All we were in was the side yard. I spoke with her. She said the Sontar figurine was her husband's favorite. The girl tilted her head. "Wait, are you talking about the silver Sontar on the third table?" I nodded slowly. She paused, reached into a shoe box beside her, and pulled out a faded photograph. "Is this her?" It was a photo of the older woman standing next to the same silver Sontar in what looked like the living room of the house. She wore the same cardigan, same smile. I nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, that's her." The girl sighed. "That's my aunt." The girl sighed. "That's my aunt. She died 2 months ago." This was her house. Tom and I didn't stay long after that. We bought one ornament, a small wooden sleigh with tiny metal runners, and I asked again if anyone else had seen the woman. They hadn't. We walked back to the car in silence. When we got in, I finally said, "She was right there, Tom." I talked to her. He didn't doubt me, just nodded. "I believe you." I turned and looked back at the house one last time. The sunlight was brighter now, almost harsh, but the silver Sontar on the table still finally seemed to shimmer more than it should. We still go to yard sales every weekend, in fact, but every now and then, when the air is still and the tables are full of stories waiting to be bought, I find myself glancing around just in case. And sometimes when I see a silver glint or hear a soft chuckle on the wind, I wonder if she's still watching, still hoping someone will take care of what she loved, still coming home for Christmas. I grew up in neighborhoods where people left their doors unlocked and waved at each other from across lawns. The kind of places where you know the names of the kids 3 houses down, where barbecues in the cul-de-sac are just part of summer, and where you don't think twice about lending someone a power drill. When my wife Emily and I bought our first home, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet part of Ridgeville, Ohio, it felt like a continuation of that same life. The streets were wide, the houses all had about half an acre of land, and the neighbors were the kind of people who said hello when you were bringing in the trash cans. We moved in 3 years ago. The garage was one of the selling points for me. Attached to the house, plenty of space for my tools, a workbench, storage for my old mountain bike, and even a second fridge for drinks and overflow groceries. I had always kept things relatively organized, not spotless, but enough that I knew where everything was. That's important later. Our neighborhood has a tradition of yard sales in the summer. Nothing official, just people putting out signs, dragging tables into the driveway, and hoping to get rid of clutter. Emily and I had held one the summer after we moved in. It was a decent turnout. Sold a few old lamps and a broken coffee maker. We hadn't done another one since, but we'd go check out others, usually just for the walk. Sometimes we'd pick up a used book, something cheap for the garden. This all started last summer in late July. It was a Friday afternoon. Emily and I were coming back from lunch, and we saw a few signs posted at the entrance of our neighborhood. Neon green poster board with thick Sharpie yard sale, 229 Maple Hill. That was only 6 houses down from ours. The man who lived there, Tom Bennett, was someone I'd always gotten along with. Not close friends, but friendly. He helped me bleed my brakes once when I was working on the Civic, and we'd had a couple beers on my back deck after that. He was in his early 50s, retired military, very fix-it type. His wife Karen was sweet and had been to one of Emily's book club meetups. When we saw they were having a sale, Emily nudged me. Want to check it out? Could use a new rake. I shrug. Sure. Let's go see what kind of junk they're getting rid of. It was warm out, a little humid, the kind of day where the sun makes the pavement shimmer and everything smells like hot grass. Tom had tables set up in the driveway, all neatly arranged, tools, camping gear, some household appliances, a few bins of books and DVDs. A few people were already browsing. I wandered toward the garage where he had some of the bigger items. That's when I saw it. A red and black Husky tool set, socket wrenches, ratchet, hex keys, all in the hard plastic case with the folding handle. Identical to mine, same scuffs, same faded look on the bottom left corner of the box. But what made my stomach tighten was the sticker. It was one of those stupid old cartoon stickers, a duck with sunglasses and a hammer saying, "Nailed it," that I had stuck on the underside of the case as a joke years ago. I froze, bent down, picked it up, flipped it over. There it was, that exact sticker in the exact spot. I hadn't used the set in a while, maybe a month or 2, but I knew I owned this, not one like it. This exact one. I set it down, didn't say anything right away. Instead, I kept browsing. I saw a digital tire inflator, same model I had, still had the same scuff near the nozzle, same scratches around the buttons. My gut twisted tighter. Then I saw the old shop light I'd kept hanging behind my workbench. Yellow body, black handle, little burn mark on the cord where it melted against a hot pipe once. Emily was chatting with Karen near a table of picture frames. I went over, smiled, tried to act normal. "Hey, Tom, big sale." He laughed. "Yeah, trying to clear out the garage a bit. Karen says if I keep collecting tools, I'm going to have to start sleeping in there." "Huh, yeah," I nodded, my skin crawling. "Some good stuff here. Take anything you want. I'll cut you a deal," he said. Emily leaned in. "We'll come back tomorrow. I want to check what frames I need for the whole way." We walked back to our house. As soon as we were out of earshot, I said, "That tool set, that was mine." Emily squinted at me. What? I'm serious. It had the sticker on the bottom. That stupid duck one I stuck on as a joke like 4 years ago. Come on, she said. You think Tom stole it? Why would he do that? I don't know, but that wasn't just similar. It was mine. I walked straight to the garage, opened the side door, started checking the shelves. The workbench, the tool set was gone. So was the air inflator. So was the shop light. Emily, I called. She walked in, arms folded. I pointed at the space under the workbench. Right there. That's where it was. She frowned. Are you sure? I didn't answer. I was already checking more things. My voltmeter, a spare drill, my older circular saw gone. Maybe you moved them, she offered, or loaned them out. I haven't loaned anything since February when I let Chris borrow my ladder. I haven't touched this stuff in weeks. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom in my garage. Had he really gone into my garage? The next morning around 10 o'clock, I went back to the sale. Emily stayed home. I walked straight to the tool set. It was still there. $75 on the tag. I had paid $200 when I bought it new. Tom was stacking some books into a bin when he saw me. Back for the tools, he asked. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. About that set. Funny thing, it looks just like mine. Same sticker and everything. He paused. Huh, weird. Got that as a gift from my cousin like a year ago. You sure? I asked. Because that sticker's kind of specific. He gave me a blank look. Yeah. I didn't put that on there. Maybe it came like that. I don't know. My hands clenched. Tom, that's my set. You took it. His smile dropped. Excuse me. I know it's mine. I'm not guessing. You were in my garage, weren't you? His jaw tightened. You need to leave, Adam. Not until I take my stuff back. You want to buy it? He asked, pointing at the tag. It's $75. Otherwise, get off my driveway. I was stunned. I should have grabbed it and walked, but I didn't. I left. Back home, I sat in the garage again, stared at the empty spots. I had left the side door unlocked. I knew that the fence gate was barely ever latched. The garage didn't have cameras. Tom had been in there before, once to help with the car, once during a barbecue. He knew the layout. I imagined him slipping in at night, maybe once, maybe a few times, grabbing 1 or 2 things at a time, and then selling them to me. The next few days, I avoided him. He didn't come over, didn't wave when he mowed, just kept his head down. I didn't go to the police. I didn't have proof beyond that sticker, and he'd already denied everything. But I changed the locks, installed motion lights, locked the side door. I haven't spoken to him since. That yard sale changed the way I looked at my neighborhood. I used to think I lived in a community. Now I keep a bat behind the garage door just in case. I was 8 the summer it happened. Back then Saturdays meant one thing. Yard sales. We lived in a small town in Oregon, tucked into the kind of suburb where every third house had a swing set and neighbors waved whether they knew you or not. My mom wasn't rich, but she was crafty, always finding good deals at estate sales, rummage events, or someone's weekend decluttering attempt. And I loved tagging along, especially for the toys. I remember that year so clearly because it was the summer after my dad moved out. Things were quieter in our house, tense sometimes. My mom didn't say much about the divorce, but she was more tired than before, more distracted. That's why I think she started dragging me and my little brother Matthew out of the house every weekend. It was her way of keeping us all busy. This one Saturday, we hit 3 or 4 sales early in the morning. The last one was a big one, a corner house with a sprawling driveway packed with everything from old baby clothes to power tools. There were balloons tied to the mailbox and signs taped to the telephone poles leading up to it. It looked like a small event, not just a regular sale. Stay close, Mom said, pulling Matthew from the back seat. I'm not chasing either of you today. I'll look at the toys, I offered, already eyeing a folding table near the garage where a bunch of plastic bins sat. Matthew whined about wanting juice, and I took the chance to wander ahead. I was old enough to stay within eyesight, and honestly, I liked being on my own. Picking through other people's stuff felt like treasure hunting. I got absorbed pretty quickly. There was a bin full of old action figures, some still sticky with dust. I remember thinking how gross but cool that was. Next to that was a box labeled games, $1 with all DS and Wii titles. I was flipping through them when I heard a voice behind me. Find anything good? I turned around. A woman, probably in her late 30s, stood there smiling. She had light brown hair pulled into a messy bun and sunglasses on her head. Her t-shirt said Mom Life in glittery letters, and she was holding an iced coffee. She looked like any mom. I assumed she was running the sale. I'm looking at the games, I said. She nodded. Oh, those are fun. My son used to play those. You know, there's a free box at the end of the driveway. You can pick something if you want. I perked up. Free boxes weren't uncommon. Usually, they were filled with random junk, but sometimes you'd find cool old Happy Meal toys, broken electronics, or small figurines. I looked down the driveway. Sure enough, there was a plastic tote sitting near the street lid off. Really? I asked. She smiled again, stepping to the side. Sure, go ahead. You can take one thing. I didn't think twice. I walked beside her, chatting about some game I saw. She nodded along, sipping her drink. At the time, it didn't feel weird, just someone being nice. Adults were usually polite to kids at these kinds of sales. We got to the bin. There were actually some decent things in there. A couple of board games, missing pieces, a stuffed Scooby-Doo, a fidget spinner. I dug around, eventually pulling out a Hot Wheels car that looked new. I like this one, I said. She bent a little, hands on her knees. Good choice. Okay, let's bring it to the car. I blinked. To the car? Yeah, just drop it in there. I'll hold on to it for you, she said casually, standing up. My car's right over there. She pointed down the street to a silver SUV. The engine was already running. I remember thinking that was odd. No one else had their car on. Still, I was 8. I figured she meant she didn't want me to forget it or something. I started walking across the quiet street, the Hot Wheels in my hand. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away right away. It was like when teachers held your hand during fire drills. But it didn't feel right. I felt it before I heard it. That sudden rush of heat behind my neck. The instinctive feeling something was off. Isabel. It was my mom's voice. Sharp, angry, scared. I went cold. The woman's hand let go. She turned quick and stiff and walked straight to the silver SUV. A man was in the driver's seat. I hadn't noticed him before. She got in without a word. The car peeled off. I was still standing in the street when my mom ran up and grabbed me. Her face was white. Her grip on my shoulder was tight. What the hell are you doing? Who was that woman? I thought she worked here, I said, confused, looking back at the driveway. Another woman, older, probably the actual seller, was coming toward us. She didn't belong here, she said to my mom. I saw her talking to your daughter and felt something was off. That's why I yelled. I remember my mom kneeling, holding my arms. Did she touch you? Did she say anything else? I told her everything. The free box, the car, how she said I should bring the toy over. My mom was shaking. I didn't fully get why at the time, but her reaction scared me more than anything else. That night, she called the police. We gave a description. They took notes, asked questions, and left. Nothing came of it. We never found out who she was. 4 weeks. I wasn't allowed out of my mom's sight. No more walking ahead at yard sales. No more treasure hunting without her right next to me. I didn't understand the gravity of it until later. It hit me one day, maybe a year later, when I was watching the news and they showed a story about a girl who'd gone missing. Same age, same town, picked up at a garage sale by someone who wasn't supposed to be there. That could have been me. I'm older now, 23, and I still think about that day. Sometimes I think about the woman's calm smile, the fact that her coffee cup had a name on it, Lisa, written in black marker, the sunglasses on her head, how ordinary she looked, how normal. That's what scared me the most. I've told the story to friends, even posted about it in a local safety forum once. Every time, people react with disbelief. Good thing your mom saw you. Or thank God that other lady noticed. But the truth is, if that woman had been a little more patient, a little quieter, a little less eager, if my mom had been distracted for 30 more seconds, my story might have ended very differently. There's a weight to that because monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they smile and offer you free toys. 4 years, Emma and Jacob had dreamed of moving out of the cramped city apartment and into a quieter place. A house with a yard, space to breathe, and a neighborhood that felt safe. So, when they finally found a modest 2-story house on Maplewood Lane, a tree-lined suburban street just outside of Crestview, they jumped at the chance. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. The first few months were a whirlwind of unpacking, painting walls, and making the place their own. Emma, a freelance graphic designer, loved how the morning light filtered through the living room windows, while Jacob, who worked in it, appreciated the garage, where he could tinker with his old motorcycle. But settling into a new home meant downsizing. Their clutter from the apartment, boxes of unused gadgets, clothes that no longer fit, old furniture crowded every corner. Emma suggested a yard sale. It's the perfect way to clear space, and maybe make some extra cash, she said one evening, flicking through local online forums where neighbors announced community sales. Jacob hesitated. What if nothing sells? What if we just waste a weekend? Emma smiled, brushing back a stray lock of hair. It's worth a shot. Plus, we'll meet neighbors and get to know the area better. On a brisk Saturday morning, Emma and Jacob were up before dawn, hauling out folding tables from the garage and setting them up along the driveway. The garage, usually reserved for Jacob's tools and his motorcycle, was transformed into a mini store. Boxes of kitchenware, books, toys, and clothes were carefully arranged. A bright blue tarp was stretched overhead, shading them from the glaring sun. Emma checked the yard sale signs one last time, hoping their neighbors would stop by. Jacob opened the garage door wide, revealing more items stacked inside with a small pathway to the house's back entrance. Let's make this fun, he said, putting on a smile. Emma nodded, already imagining the bustling weekend ahead. Traffic was steady. Some neighbors wandered over, browsing and chatting. Emma loved seeing the mix of curiosity and nostalgia in their eyes. Old board games, vintage lamps, stacks of books. Children tugged at their parents to buy toys. Jacob manned the cash box, while Emma greeted visitors. The day passed quickly, filled with laughter and bargaining, but as afternoon shadows grew longer, Emma noticed a man lingering near the garage. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, hands shoved into pockets. Something about him felt off, not threatening, but unsettling. Hey, do you need help finding something? Emma called. He shook his head and smiled faintly. Just looking, thanks. She tried to shake the unease, focusing on a group of kids picking out toys. At about 6, the sale slowed. Emma and Jacob began packing away the unsold items. The stranger was still there, now leaning against a fence a few houses down, watching. Should we ask him to leave? Emma whispered to Jacob. Jacob glanced over. Maybe just wait till he moves on. But the man didn't. When the last few neighbors left, he disappeared briefly. Emma felt a shiver. Let's close up. They locked the main house doors and pulled the garage door halfway down, but forgot to lock the door between the garage and the house, thinking it was safe inside. Hours later, as they watched a movie on the couch, the sudden creak of the kitchen door opening froze Emma's heart. Jacob was up in an instant. Did you hear that? They crept toward the sound, only to catch a glimpse of a shadow moving swiftly past the kitchen window. Emma grabbed Jacob's hand. Someone's inside. The man had slipped in through the garage door and was now somewhere in their home. Panic surged. They backed away silently, locking themselves in the bedroom and dialing 911. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the phone, whispering into it, "Yes, we're locked in the bedroom. I think someone's inside the house. Please hurry." Jacob paced back and forth, every creak and groan of the old house sending his heart racing. I can't believe this is happening. We just had a yard sale today. How did he even get in? Emma swallowed hard. The garage door. We pulled it down, but didn't lock the door to the house. I thought it was safe. The garage is usually locked from the outside. Jacob stopped pacing and looked at her. We never thought to lock that door. We treated it like part of the house, not an entrance. They stayed quiet, listening intently. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed faintly through the hallway outside their door. Emma pressed her back against the bedroom door. "Do you think he knows we're here?" Jacob shook his head, though he wasn't sure. Maybe not. Or maybe he's waiting for us to come out. Her breath hitched. "We need to stay put. Police said they're 5 minutes away. Try to stay calm." The minutes dragged on, heavy and thick. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic outside and the faint rustling somewhere in the hallway. Emma's mind raced, picturing worst-case scenarios. Was he armed? What did he want? Robbery? Worse. Jacob sat down on the bed, running his hands through his hair. Why would someone hide in our garage all day? It's been hours since the sale ended. Emma thought back to the man by the fence. I'm not sure. Maybe he thought the house was empty. Maybe he planned to come back and steal something after dark. Jacob nodded slowly. That makes sense. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from below. The basement. Emma jumped. What was that? Jacob's face went pale. I think he's in the basement. Jacob carefully moved to the window and peeked out. The street was quiet. A few cars parked along the curb. No sign of police yet. Okay. We need a plan, Jacob said quietly. If he's in the basement, that's one floor down. The back door's locked, right? Emma checked the door handle. Yes, locked. The basement door is near the kitchen, right? He might have come in through the garage, then down. Jacob nodded. We can't go out that way. Emma's phone buzzed. It was a message from the 911 dispatcher. Units arriving. Stay inside and keep the door locked. Relief flooded them, but the fear remained. Abruptly, the footsteps resumed, this time near their bedroom, upstairs. The baseball bat they kept by the bed was picked up by Emma. Jacob discovered an unwieldy flashlight. The doorknob shook. Remain composed, Jacob muttered. Emma gripped harder. Slowly, the knob turned and finally stopped. A low, unidentified voice called out, I do not wish to cause you harm. Emma's tone faltered. Who are you? You're here. But why? No response. The doorknob came to a halt. The sound of footsteps retreating along the corridor reached them. Outside, sirens cried out. Police cars arrived, their blue and red lights piercing the darkness. Carefully opening the door, Jacob entered the corridor. They're present. Emma's legs trembled as they came out of the living area. Officers shouted as they stormed through the residence. Basement 1 cop yelled, We found him. They discovered a sweaty, unkempt man huddled behind some boxes in the basement. Anxiously, his gaze darted. He was handcuffed by Officer Ramirez, who said, What caused you to break in? The man said, I was cold. I needed a place to stay. I didn't mean to scare anyone. Emma and Jacob looked at each other, and while there was a noticeable sense of relief, the shock persisted. The following day, neighbors showed interest and sympathy. We never thought something like this would happen here, Emma said to Mrs. Henderson. It's frightening how people can hide in plain sight, Mrs. Henderson said, nodding. To install an alarm system and replace the locks, Jacob contacted a locksmith. Jacob drew Emma close, and she groaned. We're not taking any chances. I thought our neighborhood was safe, but now I feel like we have to watch our backs. We'll get through this together. Claire Benson's Saturday afternoon began like any other Saturday afternoon in the sleepy suburbs of Willow Creek, a small town surrounded by rolling fields and dense forests. Emma lay in bed that night, staring at the locked garage door. What they had once thought of as an extension of their home had turned into a reminder of vulnerability, but she knew one thing. They would never let their guard down again. The Benson family farm was situated on 5 acres, surrounded by a patchwork of forest and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. Claire loved the quiet, but today something drew her attention away from the comfort of her porch swing. She had moved here 3 years ago, lured by the promise of peace and wide open spaces. an escape from the noise and chaos of city life. After picking up groceries, she was heading home down the gravel lane when she noticed a weathered wooden sign that read, "Yard Sale." This way. It was nailed to a crooked post next to the road, with its letters roughly painted in bright red. Yard sales were uncommon in this area. Instead, people tended to trade or sell online. The road narrowed quickly, with tall pines and dense undergrowth on either side. The sun was low, and the shadows lengthened across the cracked pavement. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, but she ignored it, keeping her eyes on the road. "Maybe I'll find some hidden treasure," she whispered to herself, a tiny smile piercing the silence of the car. This was the first time in months, if not years. There were only 3 houses, far apart, and the roadway dead-ended after a little mile. The house holding the sale was the second to last one. It was a simple one-story home with a sagging porch and white paint that was peeling. The grass was overgrown and dotted with clusters of wildflowers, making the front yard spacious but messy. There were no other cars, so Claire parked next to the curb. The sound of gravel crunching beneath her feet filled the silent air as she picked up her tote bag and went outside. A chilly breeze with a subtle smell of damp earth rustled through the pines. She approached the long, narrow driveway to the left of the home from a leisurely pace. She saw a smattering of objects on the grass beyond it. Just before the wood's edge, ceramic sculptures that have chipped, lamps with torn cables, mismatched chairs and framed photos that were obviously from a bygone era. "Hello," said Claire quietly. No response to "Is anyone here?" The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a blue jay. With slight interest, she wandered closer, looking at the items. The majority appeared to be items someone wanted to get rid of right away, but she was drawn to one little painting, a view of a misty riverbed. The hues were subdued and solemn. She froze as she heard a slight sound coming from the woods behind her as she reached to pick it up. At first it was a faint crack, like a twig snapping beneath your feet, then a faint mutter that was nearly identical to the whisper of the wind. Slowly, Claire turned, her gaze flitting among the thickets. She believed she saw a tall, dark figure that seemed to blend in with the trees as it moved between the trunks. A beat skipped across her heart. "Hello," she said, her voice more stern. The figure remained silent. Rather, it ventured a little farther out into a sliver of waning sunlight. A gaunt-faced man, perhaps in his late 40s, with hollow eyes that appeared to pierce the darkness. Claire felt a knot in her stomach. The man did not recognize her, nor did he smile. He remained silent as he watched Claire take a step back, a chill running down her spine. A chill running down her spine. She hurriedly answered, "I'm just looking at the sale, trying to be cool." "Is this your place?" No response. The stranger stepped forward slowly, and Claire's breath caught. The man followed silently, his pace steady, his eyes fixed on her as she walked briskly toward the driveway. Claire's mind raced as she looked toward her car parked at the edge of the street. She didn't want to come across as rude, but something about this felt wrong. "I think I'll head back now," she said. Turning around, she had heard tales of robberies and break-ins in the neighborhood, but nothing had occurred near her. When she reached the end of the driveway, she halted and turned to face him. "Are you okay?" she inquired in an attempt to defuse any. There was tension. The man's mouth twitched as though he wanted to say something, but no sound came, and then he moved closer. Claire's pulse pounded in her ears, and she turned abruptly and rushed to her car, shutting the door with shaking hands, sliding inside, locking the doors, and turning on the engine. Claire didn't wait to see what he would do next. She backed out and drove home as soon as she noticed the man standing at the edge of the street, staring after her without moving, and every shadow on the road seemed to shift and grow. Later that night, as she was browsing through the local news on her phone, she froze at a headline that read, "Man arrested for assault after yard sale robbery attempt." The photo was grainy. Claire sat back on her couch, the glow of her phone screen casting shadows across the room, her hands trembling slightly, the image of the man's hollow eyes etched in her mind, and she scrolled through the article again, However, the man's face was unmistakably the one she had seen that afternoon, and she felt a wave of relief and dread mixed inside her. She blinked hard, trying to shake the growing dread, not even realizing how close she'd gone to danger. Police warn people to exercise caution following a violent encounter at a Pine Ridge Lane yard sale that resulted in the arrest of a 46-year-old local man. The victim escaped with minor injuries. Her husband, Mark, looked up from his book next to her and said, "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Claire swallowed. She had been standing in that yard just minutes before, surrounded by silent furniture and strewn memories, unaware of how precarious the situation was. Today was a yard sale. When I paused to look, I saw nothing but grass and no one. Then, in the woods behind the home, I noticed a man who followed me as I started to leave, but he didn't say anything. I don't know, Mark. Something felt really strange. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but now I'm not sure I should have gone there at all. Mark closed his book and stepped closer, his face deepening with concern. "Did you call the police?" "No," Claire responded gently. Mark reached out and took her hand. The next morning, Claire found herself driving past Pine Ridge Lane again, this time with Mark at her side. The street was eerily quiet in the harsh daylight, and the house where she'd stopped looking abandoned. "You did the right thing getting away." "Maybe someone else called it in," she nodded, but the knot in her stomach tightened. "Do you want me to call the sheriff's office? The yard sale item is gone." Claire paused before answering. "I'm not sure," Mark said. "I simply want to ensure that everyone in the area is aware of what occurred." "Perhaps alert them," Mark murmured gently. "We should be careful. If someone like that is out here, no one's really safe." They paused close to the corner, and Claire's eyes wandered to the thick woods beyond the deserted yard, picturing the man who may be hiding there, silently observing, his dark eyes focused on the trees. The windows of their farmhouse faced the woods, and every crack and whisper of wind got her heart pounding. That night, Claire couldn't get rid of the feeling that she was being watched, so she swallowed the lump in her throat. "I suppose that's what I was scared of." Mark tried to soothe her. "It's only your imagination. The man is now in prison." But Claire wasn't convinced. Claire grew more and more uneasy over the course of the next week. She felt like she was being watched every time she went by Pine Ridge Lane, with shadows slipping just out of her line of sight. The quiet exterior of the town seemed to crumble under the weight of fear. When she heard slow, methodical footsteps behind her one afternoon, while walking their golden retriever Rusty close to the edge of the woods, she accelerated her pace and felt her heart race. "Rusty, come on," she yelled, nervously looking over her shoulder. But there was no response. She turned abruptly and noticed a tall, skinny man in a dark jacket that matched his surroundings disappearing into the trees. The shadows. "Hey," Claire called in a tremulous voice, and the man disappeared among the pines. Claire's hands trembled, and she realized that the danger had not ended yet. Someone was still waiting and watching. She told everyone everything when she got home. Mark firmly remarked, "We need to call the sheriff." Claire hesitated once more, but the police had discounted her worries the last time she had spoken to them, stating that it was likely just a local youngster or prankster. "I don't want to make things worse," she muttered. Mark's mouth clenched. "Being silent won't protect you." Claire held a flashlight while she sat at the window that night. She jumped at every rustle as the woods outside seemed to be alive with quiet murmurs. A few days later, Claire received a letter from the mailman. No address for a return. One line typed inside. Her blood ran cold when she said, "You shouldn't have come here." Mark dialed the sheriff's office right away. The letters continued to arrive, each one more menacing than the last, despite officers' promises to increase patrols in the area. Claire was aware right now. She wasn't finished with the man from the yard sale. Somewhere in the woods shadows, he was still there, observing and waiting to complete the task he had begun. The first few days after relocating to the little, peaceful community on Maple Street are still fresh in my mind. The trees were just starting to bud in the early spring, and the air had that crisp, clean feeling that hinted at warmer days to come. The most sensible option was to rent a little house here, and I had accepted a job in the next town. It was a simple, unpretentious place, but it was mine. My first significant move towards self-reliance. Living alone for the first time made me anxious. Although the area seemed to be quiet enough, despite being older, the homes were kept up nicely, and fresh flowers were arranged in tidy rows across the majority of the grounds. Although I hadn't yet met any neighbors on my first day, I gave them a kind smile when I saw them taking care of their gardens or walking their dogs. There were roughly a dozen houses on Maple Street, close enough to be able to hear your neighbors if you paid close attention, but far enough apart to feel private. The house right across from mine was my closest neighbor. An antique rocking rocker sat still on the modest porch of a one-story brick home with fading white drapes. I had seen that the porch light was left off well after sundown, and that the curtains were always drawn shut during the day. It struck me as strange, but I reasoned that perhaps the residents simply enjoy their seclusion. I saw flyers affixed on mailbox posts and telephone poles down the street a few weeks after I moved in. The entire neighborhood appeared to be invited to a yard sale that one of the neighbors was hosting the next weekend. I believed it would be an excellent opportunity to network and possibly discover some inexpensive home goods. The brick house across the street was 2 doors down from the charming blue house where the yard sale was held. Mrs. Harper, the resident, was in her late 60s. Her smile was warm and her eyes were compassionate. The street was crowded on Saturday morning when I got there. While neighbors talked and laughed in the heat, children rushed between the sale tables. Mrs. Harper welcomed me right away. She remarked cheerfully, "You must be new to the street. My name is Gladys Harper. You are welcome to look around. A little bit of everything is here." I returned the smile. "Regards, Mrs. Harper. My name is Claire. Last month, I moved in." I relaxed a bit as I looked through the old books and clothing heaps. Despite my nervousness, which had kept me tense since moving, I found that talking to Mrs. Harper helped me relax. Then, when I looked away from the rack of used jackets, I noticed activity on the other side of the street. A man was observing me from the window of the brick house across from mine. He had a pale face that was almost too still to be genuine, and he was tall and skinny. His gaze was unwaveringly on me. I went cold. Before, I hadn't seen anyone residing there, but now I was curious about his identity. Even though my heart was racing, I made myself not to turn away too soon. Rather, I lowered my head and pretended to be intrigued by an assortment of vintage magazines. After a few minutes, I ventured to look up once more. The man continued to stare at me. "Mrs. Harper," I muttered. "Who lives over there, do you know?" She scowled as she looked at the brick house. "The Matthews are there. There is only one guy. As far as I've heard, not really much of a neighbor. Keeps to himself. According to some, he has a little previous, a past." I asked, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Harper hesitated. "Let's just say he's been in trouble before. Nothing serious, but the kind of guy you don't want knocking on your door late at night." I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling exposed. "Thanks for letting me know." I tried to shake the uneasy feeling as I continued at the yard sale, picking out a few things. When I said goodbye to Mrs. Harper and started walking back to my house, I noticed the man was no longer in the window. But as I crossed Maple Street, I caught sight of him outside on his porch, pacing slowly. He didn't look away when he saw me. His eyes seemed to follow me as I hurried home. I locked the door behind me and stood with my back against it, trying to calm down. It was just a man who probably didn't mean any harm, but the pit in my stomach said otherwise. That night, I barely slept. At 2 a.m., I was startled awake by a sharp, rhythmic knocking at my front door. My pulse jumped to my throat. I peered through the peephole and saw him standing there motionless, looking straight at the door, as if he expected me to open it. The porch light cast an eerie glow, outlining his shadow on the welcome mat. My hands shook as I stepped back from the door. I didn't respond. After a few more knocks, he turned and walked away slowly. I sat on the floor and pressed my head to the cold wood of the door. The silence that followed was almost worse than the knocking. The next day, I was determined to find out more about the man. I approached Mrs. Harper during the afternoon and asked if she knew anything else. "Not much," she said, eyes wary. "His name's Victor Matthews. He's lived here off and on 4 years. People say he used to be in and out of jail, mostly for petty crimes and some assault charges. Not the kind you want living across the street when you're alone." Her words confirmed my fears. The days after were filled with moments of quiet dread. Sometimes I'd catch him watching from a window. Other times I'd see him lurking near the edge of his yard. Sometimes just standing still and staring in my direction. One evening I was sitting on the couch reading when I heard footsteps outside my front window. I peered out and saw him standing just a few feet away, looking directly inside. He didn't move when I blinked or when I pulled the curtains. He just stood there unmoving. I backed away and called the police. When the officers arrived, they spoke to Victor on his porch. He insisted he was just out for a walk and that he hadn't been near my house. But when the police walked back to my place, they found fresh footprints on my front lawn and scratch marks on the side of my house. "Wrong address," Victor told them flatly. The officers seemed skeptical, but left after giving him a warning. I started installing new locks and security cameras, but still felt unsafe. Every night, the fear that he might come back grew stronger. Luckily, after a month, Victor moved out. No one knew where, and the quiet on Maple Street returned. I still wonder what his intentions were. Why did he keep watching? Why did he come knocking in the dead of night? I'm just glad I moved away before things could get worse. Over the next few weeks, I stayed extra cautious. I double-checked locks every night and kept my phone close. The late-night knocking never happened again, but I often caught fleeting glimpses of Victor from my windows. Sometimes he was just standing outside staring blankly, sometimes pacing near his driveway. He never tried to talk to me again, but that feeling of being watched lingered. One evening, I saw moving vans outside his house. The next day, he was gone. I never asked Ruth why or where he moved, and she never offered. A part of me was relieved, but I also felt uneasy that I never really understood him, or why he had fixated on me. Months passed and the neighborhood slowly became just a place where I lived. Not a place that made me nervous, but every now and then when I walked past that empty house across the street, I felt a chill creep up my spine, like I was being watched by eyes no longer there. I never reported Victor again. The police seemed to think it was just a misunderstanding, but I knew better. Some people don't just leave. Sometimes they wait, hidden behind quiet windows, biding their time. And maybe that's the scariest part.